Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Public Relations Society of America, Los Angeles chapter, and our second happy hour hangout. And today we're going to be hanging out with our good friends at the Los Angeles Business Journal. My name is Eric Deutsch, and I am 2014 chapter president of PRSA-LA. I'm also principal of Excel PR Group, which is a public relations and media strategy firm here in Los Angeles. Now, if you attended our first happy hour hangout back in February, you know the format. We call these hangouts because we use the Google Plus Hangouts platform to deliver our video. And we call them happy hour because, after all, it is happy hour. We want you all to have a good time. It's fun. Now, I know some of you are watching on our website at PRSA-LA.org. Others may be watching on our Google Plus page. Regardless of how you're tuning in, we want you to submit questions. And the easiest way to do that is if you're watching on our website, submit your questions via Twitter using hashtag PRSA-LA. And if you're on our Google Plus page, simply, if you're logged in, simply post a comment, and that will serve as a question. You don't see her right now, but she's going to be joining us from time to time throughout the hour, is Kim Tronick. She is a member of our social media committee, and she's going to be chiming in with questions from the audience. Now, a quick word of warning. That's a little heavy. It's not really warning, but just a quick cautionary note. Hangouts is a great platform, but you never know what might happen. It is possible that one or more or all of our panelists may lose their audio or their video, or they may lose their connection altogether. Now, if that happens, don't worry about it. Just pour another drink, kick back, and we'll be right back, I promise. Before we begin, a couple of quick things I want to mention. One is about membership and about PRSA. If you are not a member, you can learn a lot more about our organization on our website, PRSA-LA.org. We are one of the founding chapters of the Public Relations Society of America, launched in 1948. We're one of the largest chapters. We have well over 500 members, and we have a wide range of member benefits, professional development opportunities, accreditation, events. The fact is, there's actually never been a better time to join if you're not already a member. There's a new member promotion that goes through the end of August, and I believe the code is SUMMER14 is the promo code, and if you join the national organization during that period, you get free local chapter dues. That's about a $100 value. Again, you can learn more about that on our website. The other thing I want to point out is that it is the 50th anniversary of our PRISM Awards, and the PRISMs are our annual awards competition to honor the very best in public relations in Los Angeles. It's open to public relations practitioners in the greater LA area, as well as those outside the area who did work on behalf of LA-based clients over the past year. It's very easy to enter the competition. We were one of the first chapters to do an all digital, all online submission process. And we are currently right in the midst of our call for entries. In fact, the early entry deadline, the discount deadline, is 1 week from today, August 4th. The late deadline, or the final deadline, is September 8th. So if you want to get the recognition that you deserve, and if you want to be honored for all of your hard work, definitely check out the PRISM Awards call for entries. And speaking of which, our very own Kim Tronick, who you'll see a little bit later in the hour, she has produced a video to help us promote and get the word out about the PRISM Awards and the call for entries. It's only about 25 or 30 seconds. It is super high energy. It'll definitely get us in the mood. So let's go ahead and debut that video right now.
Hey, here pros. We're talking to you. Pay attention, here's what you gotta do. You work real hard and you need some props, so submit your work and show us what you got. It's the Prism Awards and we celebrate the best. The greatest PR campaigns in the West. Best part of all is our 50th year. So get on board for creative cheer. So mark your calendar to get down with them. It's the Prism. It's the Prism. It's the Prism.
Okay, if that doesn't get you in the mood, I don't know what will. Anyway, you can learn more about the Prisms on our website, and also mark your calendar for Wednesday, November 19th. That is our big Prism 50th anniversary banquet. We're going to be taking over the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. Should be a good time. And with that, I'm going to wrap up my introductory comments. I'm going to turn over to the panel for introductions. I'm going to ask everybody to provide a brief self-introduction. Tell us a little bit about your background, what you do at the LA Business Journal, and tell us how you approach your beat. And of course, in the case of Jonathan Diamond as managing editor, just give us an overview of how you business news in Los Angeles. But why don't we go ahead and start from left to right, at least my left to right. I don't know about everyone else, with Bethany.
Sure. Well, I'm a Midwest girl. I went to Purdue University in Indiana for undergrad. I graduated then in 2011 with my master's in journalism from the University of Southern California here in downtown LA. And I've been at the Business Journal since 2011, so coming up here on 3 years. I cover real estate for the Business Journal. It's a beat that I've covered for almost a year now. Before that, I covered retail, restaurants, hospitality, that kind of thing. But real estate is my big beat now. It's let's see, it's something that is very sort of transactional based here. I write a weekly column that highlights some of the top 2 or 3 big real estate deals, whether it was a building sale or a lease, every week. I also write longer feature stories where I might look at a development or some kind of trend happening in the real estate world.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Bethany. James, tell us about a little bit about your background and how you approach banking news in Los Angeles.
Sure. I'm also a Midwesterner. I went to undergrad at USC, studied journalism, worked for a handful of daily newspapers covering politics before coming to the Business Journal. I've been here a little more than 3 years now. First covering manufacturing and the ports, and for the last little more than a year and a half covering commercial banking, private equity, finance. Lately been focusing more on commercial banks and also wealth. Yeah, I mean, I want to know everything there is to know about what banks headquartered in Los Angeles County are up to, what non-bank lenders are up to, anything that's finance in LA. I want to understand what's happening. I think my interest is usually in trying to figuring out sort of what's underneath, what the strategy is, why people are doing what they're doing, where the money's going, and yeah, I guess that's it.
And terrific. And can you tell us just briefly about the Wealthiest Angelenos, how you cover that?
Sure. I mean, really everyone at the paper works on Wealthiest Angelenos. We all kind of divvy up, between 50 and 100 folks who we think might be on the list, and we all research them. I have sort of a special focus on trying to out, as we'd say, new billionaires or billionaires who are not known to the greater world. So that's another focus of mine, is finding new billionaires for our list.
Interesting. Do you find that they don't want to be outed, typically?
Some, I would say most do not. Some bizarrely do, but most have no interest in being found.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Jonathan?
You want to go to Omar first? Or?
We can. You want to, Omar, you ready?
So, let him go.
Oh, whatever you'd like. Yeah, my name is Omar Shamout.
Omar Shamout.
I've been at the paper for about 5 months. So not quite as long as Bethany and James. But like them, I also graduated from USC. I got my master's in journalism about a year ago, and I cover technology. Oh, the feedback is very strong. I cover tech businesses, which means that I cover a lot of businesses that are doing things that no one's ever done before and making money in ways that no one's ever made money before. So my job is to kind of explain that to business people in LA.
Hey, terrific. Thank you, Omar. This is one of those unpredictable Hangout issues. Are you getting feedback?
A tremendous amount. Yeah.
I'm going to ask our producer how we can handle that. No? If anyone has their speaker on, please turn it off. Okay, hopefully that will fix itself, Omar. Jonathan, let's go to you. Tell us about your background and how you approach your job as managing editor.
Fear and loathing. This is my second stint at the Business Journal. I've been here for about a year and a half. I came here initially in 2000 when I moved to LA from New York, and was here for about 4.5 years. And my responsibilities here are the real estate, actually the crew you see here except for Rufus, and I pick up a couple other folks. And it's everything from managing the traffic of the paper to planning schedules for performing issues and working both on editing copy and pre-editing, working with reporters to develop their stories.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to go back to Bethany, not only because she's on the far end of the list here, but I think her audio may have been the best. We're going to work on audio for Omar and Jonathan in the meantime. Hey, Bethany, tell me, how many email pitches do you get a day, on average?
I don't know. A couple of dozen at least, I would say. I mean, I get several hundred emails. I would say a couple dozen of them are full pitches, but.
And what is it in an email that appeals to you or gets you to open it versus just hitting delete?
Well, I think first of all, getting my name right, spelling my name, not calling me Brittany or Beth, but calling me Bethany, that helps. But I think also having some familiarity with my work and my beat. I get a lot of pitches for things that are not real estate, and I have to maybe direct them to other reporters. So I think, understanding that I cover real estate is important as well. Those are sort of the basics, but.
Great, thanks, Bethany. I'm going to ask Kim Tronick. Kim Tronick, come on, unmute yourself for a moment. Kim.
Hello.
Hey, Kim.
Hi.
Are you able to see online if people are having issues with audio on our Hangout? Because I am.
Yeah, I'm hearing a little bit of echo. I haven't seen anything submitted through Twitter that anyone's having any tech issues. Yeah, if everyone's having issues, they're not speaking up.
Maybe it's not too bad. All right, thanks, Bethany. Let me wrap or go back to your comments about what you look for in an email and what actually attracts your attention. How can a PR pro working in the real estate field get on your radar? What's the best way if they don't have a relationship with you?
I mean, I think the easiest way is just sort of send me an email that's friendly and introduce yourself, tell me sort of why you're significant in the LA real estate world. I'm willing to entertain most emails like that. I think I'd rather sort of talk with someone and understand what they do and then decide from there. I'm pretty inclusive.
Oh, what's the single worst thing that a PR person could do that will absolutely turn you off, make you never want to talk to them again?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one, but.
Can I jump in on that?
Absolutely.
I think it's true for no matter what business you're in. It's lack of preparation. Not knowing who you're contacting, not knowing what they cover, not knowing how we cover things is a series of strikes that are going to really make it much more difficult. I don't think we expect people to understand, the intricacies of each individual beat, perhaps, but they ought to know what the reporter's interested in general. And Bethany covers real estate, for instance, and we'll pitch her a tech story. It's sort of the fact that we cover LA companies seems to surprise a lot of people. We get a lot of pitches from folks from out of town who don't understand why we don't want to do their author tour story. So understanding what we do, at least at the surface level, is a real big help.
Gotcha. We asked the same question to James, and then ultimately to Omar. How many emails do you guys get a day from PR people, James? And what makes an email stand out to you?
I hate to say it, but I don't know how many I get directly from PR folks, but I'd say the thing that makes one stand out is a good one. I'd say most are. I'm sorry. Most are really not very good. Most are from out-of-town firms, from firms that we're not in a million years going to write about, or are about stories that aren't stories in any way. It's, hey, look what a great job we're doing lately. So, I'd say the thing that stands out is something that's good. I think once in the last year, I got an email from someone that I almost could have immediately submitted as a pitch to my editors. That's happened once, ever, that I can think of in 8 years of doing this. So that's a high bar. I'll acknowledge that, but that one stands out to me.
I think you kind of answered this question already, but just to drive the point home and make all of us PR people feel bad, what is the single worst thing that a PR person could do? What will absolutely turn you off and sour a relationship forever?
I think just not being, everyone writes, a lot of people write bad pitches or send an email that's not particularly useful. That's not a mark against you necessarily. I think the thing that will sour something is if you're not willing to be helpful. Like if you don't want to be helpful. If I say, well, we wouldn't really cover that, but could you put me in touch with a client who blah blah blah, and some people are very flexible and say, yeah, we can work on that, and others just have no interest in doing more than sending you the pitch that they sent, which was terrible. So not being able to get past that point is a deal breaker.
I think also there's a certain amount of trust that's involved. I mean, we understand that PR people are not just pitching us necessarily. In fact, they're probably pitching a wide array of folks. And if there is, we're competitive. We live things first, and exclusively if we can get it. And as long as there's conversation about that and there's understanding, and we can know that we'll feel safe pursuing, because we operate at a little bit of disadvantage because we're a weekly. So if someone tells us, yes, we're going to hold this until Monday when your paper comes out, and then on Monday morning we open up the Times and see the story, that's sort of a violation of trust, and that's a real problem, I think, for us.
Violation of trust, absolutely. Omar, same question for you. Roughly how many pitches do you get? You cover the tech beat. I imagine you get quite a few from startup companies. How many do you get a day, and what makes an email stand out to you?
I get about 20 to 30 each day. If we cut out there, but a pitch that will stand out to me is telling me about a new company and telling me why they're changing the industry that they operate in. Not simply about a new product launch or some new service they offer, but why it's new. Companies offer new products every day. So just on a larger scale, understanding why it's important to not just their company, but to the industry at large. Again, the not being headquartered in LA is another thing that I come across a lot. And I've also had publicists tell me why I shouldn't be doing the story I'm doing and trying to convince me to write a different story. And that's kind of frustrating as well.
I can imagine. A quick question for all the panelists. Our producer, who is trying to figure out why we're having some mild audio issues, asked if any of you have the event page open right now, in addition to your Google Plus page.
The event page.
Yeah.
No.
What is the event page?
What is the event page? That's a very good question.
There you go.
Hi, the producer. Here's some things that we are observing here. Okay. We've noticed that who is back-to-back windows together in the office?
That's probably me and James.
So when one of you is talking, please mute the other person. That's what I think we're getting the feedback from. So
When what?
when one is talking, it's picking up the voice.
I see. So when James is talking, I'll mute, and vice versa.
Yes. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
And thank you to our producer. Omar, just to wrap up your thoughts about how someone gets on your radar and what appeals to you in an email initially. What is the worst thing a PR person can do? You mentioned trying to get you to write something other than what you're already working on. But is there a cardinal sin that you can point to?
I wouldn't say a cardinal sin, but there are definitely things that can make it more difficult. Just a lack of understanding of business coverage versus traditional tech coverage, and why we need to talk about different things than perhaps, say, a TechCrunch or Recode would do. We, more than just the tech, we talk about the money. And there are certain questions that we ask that other tech publications wouldn't ask, such as what type of revenue growth have you seen, and why is that, or why are you looking to do better? So there's things that make coverage for a business publication different than a traditional tech publication, and just a fundamental lack of understanding of that is difficult to deal with.
Do you find that there are actually PR people out there who pitch you stories who are completely unfamiliar with the Business Journal, who clearly have not read not only your section, but the whole thing?
All the time, unfortunately.
The question for perhaps all of you, but maybe initially Jonathan. Now, the LA Business Journal is a weekly, and news happens all throughout the week. Can you discuss a little bit how the weekly printing schedule combined with the daily emails that go out from the Business Journal and the online coverage, how PR people can deal with that, especially when embargoes are involved?
Don't get me started on embargoes. Well, we do have a web presence and a Twitter presence, and as you mentioned, we have these daily email blasts, and we try and keep the web and the digital component for our breaking news. So as things come during the day, I mean, we have another tech reporter who handles web duties exclusively, and she's writing about funding rounds, and just we put them up, we put them in our afternoon newsletter, and we push those out. The publishing schedule we've got for the paper is a little bit different. And just actually another note on the web, we try and get our newsletter out by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So if there's something that's really breaking that we need to get a hold of, this should be out. If someone wants to pitch that, they should pitch it before 2, so we have a chance to do that for the day. Excuse me. For the paper, we start our process really on Friday. The paper goes out the door Thursday night to the printer, and on Friday we start the reporting process all over again. Sometimes, ideally, reporters start even before that. And we like to have our stories in Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning. Stuff happens and it rolls into Wednesday evening, Thursday afternoon. So I mean, for the news and news features that we do for the paper, the earlier in the week we can have people talk to us about them, the better. We have the reporters send us pitches on Tuesdays, and we send out a tentative budget for the week 10 days prior, the issue 10 days following that Tuesday. So we have starting tomorrow, we'll be looking for pitches for the week of the 8th. Excuse me, the 11th. So there's a long lead time on the print stuff. So the earlier we can talk to somebody about it, the better.
Okay, that's very helpful. Could you speak for a moment to Jonathan about how the Orange County Business Journal, the LA Business Journal, and the San Fernando Valley Business Journal, which are all, I believe, the same organization, how they work together, or how they don't work together?
You know, we are all part of the same corporate family, and there's one down in San Diego as well. We probably work most closely with the San Fernando Valley paper because it's their coverage areas in LA County. San Diego and Orange County, we share budgets, and on occasion with Orange County, there'll be some overlapping coverage, and we may pool resources. But in general, we do clear things with the Valley paper, and they clear things with us. But in most cases, we work independently and just sort of keep each other apprised of what's going on, but the coverage isn't really shared.
So if I have a client in the San Fernando Valley, which is part of LA, would I inherently pitch the San Fernando Valley Business Journal or both?
Yes. Yeah, you should pitch the Valley, because we'll call and check and see if they're doing anything. So that we sort of cede that territory to them, with the exception of Disney and DreamWorks, I think. But otherwise, we'll cede the rest of the Valley to our cousins over there.
Terrific. You know, it appears that we have a couple of questions from Kim. So Kim, why don't you join the Hangout and tell us what you got?
Hello.
Hello.
So I've got a question from our Google Plus page from Sam Brune, I believe it's pronounced. Sam wants to know, do you think a pitch can be too informal? Do you like pitches with more of a conversational tone?
I'm gonna jump in if that's all right. The tone is, if the tone is ever a problem, it's like 1 in 100. We're looking at the content. We're looking at, is there a story here or not? I think I can speak for most of us when I say the tone is not of vital importance. Formal, informal, it's the content that we're interested in.
On the other hand, if it does seem like that someone is shooting us a personal email rather than a mass blast, that does, for me anyway, tend to make me think more highly of the person. But again, yeah, no, James is totally right. It's all about the content and what's being pitched. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day about the tone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I agree.
I'm sorry, Bethany.
I was going to say that, yes, I agree that the tone doesn't matter. In fact, sometimes it can be nice to have sort of an informal conversation with someone. And actually something that I maybe didn't mention before, because I went first in talking about sort of what makes a pitch good or bad or that kind of thing, I think just really being sort of transparent and therefore potentially informal with me, I think goes a long way. I think, sort of telling me what the background is that you're working on this in terms of, I've gotten pitches where people have said all of a sudden, like, actually, we really don't want you to cover this kind of thing anymore. And instead of telling me why, they'll just say, well, we just can't. And so I think having sort of a personal, informal conversation and saying, this is why we can't do this, I think is good.
I'd like to interject just for a moment. I've been to so many panel discussions with media people where they say, oh, don't pretend that you're my friend. Don't say, hey, Eric, how you doing? Or anything like that in the email. It's almost like this knee-jerk response by some media folks to resent that. But you guys don't feel that. You're okay with that.
I suppose if there was some overly chummy way of contacting me that is, it might be slightly off-putting, but I don't think that if the content was good that it would keep me from contacting you to find out more.
Okay.
I think it depends on the relationship you have with that person also. I talk to, there are folks around town, PR professionals who I know, and, if we talk on a Monday, we'll hey, what did you do this weekend? You know, I mean, I'm more likely to. I'll have that conversation with someone. I can be chummy with people. But if you don't know me, you know, trying to come off as chummy seems sleazy, I guess. Right?
Okay. Kim, you mentioned that you had 2 questions.
Yes, wonderful. So we also got another question submitted via the Google page from Sheena Taliramani. I hope that's pronounced something similar. And she would like to know, what's your preference for handling pitches that might cross over beats? For example, a real estate company that's received $50 million in private equity for real estate redevelopment in Southern California seems like it could fall into both James and Bethany's wheelhouse.
Sure. I think it sort of depends on what the money is being used for. A lot of times I don't cover financing deals, especially if it's not money that's sort of doing anything immediately other than, I mean, if it's just a refinance or that kind of thing, I think that would fall more into James' beat, whereas if it's money that they're using because they are going to redevelop a project and they're going to be making some substantial changes or that kind of thing, then that might fall more under real estate.
I would just jump in on that. We're fairly, as you can probably tell from the back, we all sit pretty close to each other and we're fairly collegial. So it's not wrong to make a mistake and send something to the wrong beat. You know, I get stuff emailed to me and I just dole them out as appropriate. And sometimes I'll send the same email to 2 different folks if I think it's something they should fight over. And just, you know, we talk about it, we sort it out. It depends on how busy somebody is one week. If it's in a gray area, level of interest in the subject, familiarity with the principles involved. There's a whole variety of things, but in general, it's, you know, doesn't, as long, if you're going to submit to 2 people, do it in the same email so they can see that you're doing it. And if you're, you know, submitting to one, it's likely that you might get a call. I mean, if there's a potential overlap, you may get a call back from somebody else if there's interest.
Yeah, I would just say that I would agree that, you know, send it to both, and you know, it's kind of, it could be one week one of the people doesn't have a story yet and the other does, and if it's time sensitive, then the one that doesn't have a story will do it. There may not be any particular reason other than that story gets done that way. So I would say send it to both unless you have like a, you know, a personal relationship with one of the journalists. But yeah.
You know, the Business Journal is a business-oriented publication. How important is artwork? If my story has a amazing visual opportunity with it, is that going to help get the story in the paper, or is that not that important?
I think it's something that we all think about. I pitched a story for the coming issue of the paper. Not entirely, but in large part because I knew that the art would be really great. Like, the story may be kind of a wobbler, maybe one that we wouldn't do if the art were going to be terrible, but the art was going to be great, so why not do it? Art's a fun part of the story, but it's, you know, it's usually not that make or break.
No, but I think the more familiar are you with the paper, you'll see that there are certain slots that are featured prominently, and art goes into not the decision making about whether we do a story or not, but, you know, when we're putting together the paper and organizing all the copy that's coming over the course of the week, part of the calculation is what kind of art do we have. And a note on that, we shoot stuff, except for the columns, everything is, and cases where we're caught in a pinch, we generate just like our own copy, which is also something you folks ought to know, is that, you know, we're generating all our copies generated in-house. So too are our photographs. So, you know, that's one area where making the principals who are interviewed for the story available for a photograph is also really helpful.
Terrific. Yeah, this is a question that comes up at every media event that I attend, and at first I thought the question was almost an illegitimate question. It really annoyed me, and then I began to see merit to the question, and now I'm genuinely interested. in how people respond. Is the press release dead? Anybody?
I'll jump in and say no, but it's not. I don't think it's a terribly useful tool if your goal in putting a press release out is to have someone write about what is in that press release. But I am glad that press releases exist and hope they continue to exist, because I think they're sort of useful historical documents. I can go back and look and see what this company said it was doing 2 years and 3 months ago. What was this release that they sent out in November that still lives online, in 17 different places? So, I mean, that's useful. It's good context. I hope that continues to exist. But, yeah, I mean, as a tool for getting stories written by a publication, I don't know that they're terribly useful.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody else want to weigh in on that topic?
I would say that they're not dead either. But James is right. Rare is the occasion where or if ever, that I've written a story based purely on what's in the press release. But if you begin to notice a trend of things happening in an industry, you notice 2 or 3 or 4 press releases that are kind of talking about the same thing in different ways, then you can kind of begin to get ideas. Or if you hear about an interesting company, you may begin to follow it and try to find out more about it. They're also great because if you don't know who the PR person is at a company, you can always Google for one of their press releases and find that information. So I've done that many times as well.
Terrific. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would say that I sort of agree with the two of them in that, I'm never going to write something based purely off of a press release, but I think that they are sort of a useful way to pack a lot of information in one small sort of document. I think especially with real estate, when I'm writing stories that have, specific amounts of square footage, prices, who, buyer, seller, there's a lot of sort of transactional details that I think it's nice to have sort of packed into one short, quick document.
Okay. One of the worst things that can happen to a PR professional is to have a client that did not make it in a industry roundup story. And you open up the paper and you see all their competitors, and they are very conspicuously not in the story. What is the best way to ensure that doesn't happen? For example, Omar, you have so many companies, tech companies that you cover, many in the same space, app developers creating the same type of app or same general type of app. If I'm doing publicity for one of those companies, how do I make sure that we don't miss out when it comes time to do a roundup?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times the fact that they were missed is purely because I didn't know about them and it wasn't anything personal. But a great way that I think is for a PR person to reach out, absent of a story. And say, hey, can we just have a chat? Do you want to meet for a coffee? Let me tell you about the companies that I work with. And I'm always, make themselves available to answer questions about the industry, just so we can go to them as a resource. So I would recommend that.
Terrific. Anyone else?
It's hard to include everyone in a roundup. I know I've had my own experiences of writing a roundup type story and then getting emails the next week that say, hey, that story was great. Did you know about this company that does the exact same thing? And, often, like Omar said, it's because maybe I wasn't aware of them. And so while, we're not going to write about that again right away, I think that's a good opportunity to introduce yourself and make sure that the next time I do write something along those lines that your name or this company is something that we're aware of.
Yeah, I'm going to ask all of you guys. Omar, you mentioned that PR pros can take you out to coffee. You didn't say lunch, but you did say coffee. Which are you guys all open to that? Are you actually committed to if a PR pro is relevant to your space and does want to have some FaceTime with you, not for a specific story, but just to get acquainted? You guys are up for that?
Well, for me personally, again, I'm relatively new to the tech beat, so for me at this point, covering tech, it is useful. It's not going to happen every week just because I don't have time every week, but I mean, I do like to make time at least a couple times a month to meet, with PR folks and understand what new companies are out there and who they work with. And maybe James and Bethany feel different because they've been covering their beats for longer, but for me now it is useful.
James?
No, I mean, absolutely. Come down. I'll even buy you lunch. I might buy you lunch. Maybe. I mean, no. I mean, really. Like, I mean, sort of to sort of put the fish on the table. Like, I think if I think you represent clients who could be useful to me, and if I think that you could be useful to me, that will be a fruitful relationship, then yeah, by all means, let's get some FaceTime. If you've sent me 17 bad pitches and I know that you don't represent any clients I care about, I'm probably going to be really busy all the time.
Okay. Bethany, anything to add to that?
I mean, I definitely find coffees and lunches, and sometimes I'll even do an after-work drink. I find it helpful. It's nice to get to know somebody face-to-face and easier to remember them, when you're writing a story that might be relevant to what they do. I actually do take a lot of meetings, mostly on Mondays and Fridays, because those are our days when we're most free. But yeah, I find it, and I will check in. I mean, there are a lot of sort of big players in the real estate world who I find it valuable to also sort of have lunch with or coffee regularly, 2 or 3 times a year, just to catch up.
That's really good to hear. I understand we have a couple more questions from Kim. So Kim, come back. We need you.
I'm back. Hello. Wonderful. So I've got a question here from Matt Meyerhoff via Google Plus, and he wants to know if you guys have any preferences for what types of positions at a company you'd want to either use for interviews or get quotes from. For example, do you always want to get a quote from a CEO, or do you want to talk with someone with technical experience on a product or service?
For me, usually it's the CEO that's best because, again, we don't necessarily talk about the technical aspects of the software or app or whatever. We're talking about the money. So CEO is great, or I've talked to chief revenue officers as well and COOs, but usually our audience is not as interested in why the thing works. It's how the thing makes money. So
I think it really depends on the story. I mean, I think our preference is almost always, yeah, we want to have a chat with the CEO, we want to have a chat with the top person, but there are plenty of stories. If I were writing about a bank and a particular type of lending that this bank does, yeah, I might want to chat with the CEO about that, but I'm also going to want to talk to the sort of product manager for that, their head tech banker or their head international trade banker. So I mean, we always want to talk to the CEO, but there are a lot of cases where we will want to talk to that more kind of downstream expert.
I would say the same thing. CEOs are great, but especially for real estate, I mean, if the company is based in LA, the CEO or someone from the executive team I think would be great. Sometimes also research analysts who work for the company who can give me a lot of sort of local market data. I appreciate speaking with them as well. But sort of a unique part about the real estate beat is that while most other beats at the LA Business Journal need the company to be headquartered in Los Angeles to cover something that they're doing, with real estate, it's the property or the project that needs to be based in Los Angeles County. So there are plenty of real estate trusts from New York or elsewhere outside Los Angeles that I cover as long as they have a project on the ground in Los Angeles County. So in that case, it'd be nice to talk to someone from the executive team, the CEO maybe, but it'd also be nice to, I mean, if that person is not the person who's on the ground here in Los Angeles actually working on that project, then I'd also probably have a preference for actually the person in LA County.
Hey, terrific. Kim, you mentioned you have 2 questions.
Actually, I have a few. Now they're all coming in. Dennis Wolcott from Twitter says, your editor says that you only cover businesses, but Dennis says he's seen some other issues covered. Do you have any thoughts or input about that?
I mean, we do have, for instance, a reporter who covers government, but it's sort of, the impact of government and regulation on businesses. And I can't think of, I certainly can't think of many stories, if any, that he's written that weren't pegged to here's this business and what's going on with it and how, regulation is affecting it. So even then, yeah, our stories are focused on a business.
I can't think of any examples of having written about an issue that's not been based on a business here or a piece of property here. Maybe this tweeter could give an example of what type of issue he's seen us publish other than a business.
Sure, yeah, we can definitely send him a question. In the meantime, I have a couple of other ones submitted via Twitter. Maggie would like to hear from Omar on upcoming coverage focus. Maggie wants to know, what kind of companies and trends will you be looking to be connected with?
Well, obviously, Silicon Beach is a term that gets overused, but it's an area where a lot of money is coming into from VCs. So that's an area that I'm always looking out for. Owing to our location here in LA, there's also lots of tech companies that have sprung up around content and helping content creators better understand their audiences and better distribute content and sell ads. There's those are two areas that I've covered a lot recently, and I anticipate more coverage of in the future.
Omar, I'd like to follow up with that real quick. You mentioned the term Silicon Beach, and you said it's overused. I know a lot of people who feel that way. It sounds better to me than Silicon Alley, which is New York. I'll take the beach over an alley any day. But why do you think it's been overused, right? Or what is that perception that term somehow is, annoying?
Well, I think there's also some confusion about what it's referring to. Is it a geographic location? Is it a mindset? Is it a type of industry within the tech economy that they're focusing on? And the answer is kind of all of the above. We've used it for a variety of different connotations. So I think that a lot of, I don't know about a lot, but some of the tech entrepreneurs that I've talked to kind of bristle at the term, if only because they think that it means that they only came to LA to sit by the beach and take advantage of that, when in fact they're not even by the beach. And there's kind of the connotation with like a certain type of entrepreneur that works in Silicon Beach, the Evan Spiegels of the world. So they don't want to necessarily be associated with that. So there's a few different reasons, but again, at this point, the term is pretty ubiquitous, so it's hard to just stop using it, and then that becomes a thing, and then it is a very easy way to kind of bring up certain types of topics and have everybody know what you're talking about.
If I'm doing PR for a local tech company, should I refrain from using that in my pitch? Will that actually hurt my pitch or help it, or neither?
It doesn't hurt or hinder to me. If you're just kind of using it, if the pitch is, oh, a new company in Silicon Beach, and it depends what the company does, beyond that. The fact that you mentioned Silicon Beach is going to get me to write about it, because again, there are plenty of other companies in Silicon Beach. It all depends on what they're doing.
Great. Kim, did you mention you had quite a few others?
Yeah, they're all coming in. Sally from Twitter, Sally Falco, would like to know, now, do journalists use company newsrooms, and if so, how often?
What's a company newsroom?
Maybe not the big open space that we're seeing you in right now.
Let's. What industry would be most likely to use that? Jonathan, would it be tech, where a writer needs quick information and would rely on a company's own online newsroom? Is there an industry that would be most reliant on that?
Well, were you going to say something, Jonathan? Go ahead. Well, I mean, I certainly have used companies' newsrooms online to try to find a contact person or just more information about something that I was pitched. But it totally depends. I wouldn't even know how many times I use it, on a monthly basis or weekly basis. The more information you can give us, is great. But it's not necessarily information that we're looking for all the time. But.
When you do go to an online newsroom, do you go to what section do you tend to gravitate to? Do you go to an archive of news releases? Do you go to fact sheets? Do you go to I don't know, whatever else is on there? Is there a particular area that you rely on the most?
I look for a good press contact. I look for the email address and phone number of a real person, not pr@snapchat.com or something like that. I mean, I want a real person. That's if I'm there, that's what I'm looking for.
So the single best thing that you can have in an online newsroom is the actual name of a contact person, cell phone number, and an email address.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's also where all those press releases live, so I can look and see what you were doing 10 years ago.
I got a couple of questions, but Kim, I'd love to focus on the audience. Do you have any others?
I do. And this is another one from Sam Brune via Google+. And Sam wants to know if you consider a company blog to be a credible news source or no.
Well, I think to the extent that it has a record, I mean, the blog posts can disappear just as easily as they can appear too. But I think if we're looking for statements that were made by company executives over time, and the archive continues to exist, then it can fill in. Certainly, when trying to match the current reality against the reality of the recent past or the distant past. So I can see that being the same way press releases would be of value.
Jonathan, if we're talking about a public company and they have financial information, are you okay finding that information through the company's blog, or do you need to see some kind of newswire release to feel that it's credible?
With a public company, what they put on their homepage ought to be credible, because I can't imagine it would differ from what they post with the SEC, and so to that extent, I think, and I defer to the reporters who follow the public companies, but I'm pretty sure that public companies are held to a pretty high standard when it comes to reporting numbers, so I would trust what they put on their sites. Private companies are a different matter.
To that point, speaking of websites and looking at social media, do you guys rely on social media to come up not only with story ideas, but to stay abreast of what's happening in your editorial beat? How important is it? Where are you guys spending your time on social media?
I use Twitter quite often. Obviously, covering tech. There's a lot of tech news on Twitter and a lot of people to follow. So, yes, I would say Twitter is very helpful in coming up, not necessarily with story ideas, but just kind of to know what's going on and what people are talking about.
Is it a viable platform to actually pitch you a story? Are you open to that on Twitter or other social media sites, or is that not why you're there?
I don't think I've ever had anyone pitch me a story on Twitter, but again, if somebody wants to reach out to me on Twitter, I'm open to that. Sure.
The average. Sorry, go ahead, Fern.
You can go ahead.
was just going to say the average bank CEO is not on Twitter, and is not putting, the average bank is not putting out a lot of information on Twitter or other social media, or at least the banks that we care about here. So, not something I deal with frequently.
I'm on Twitter, but I would say that I've never been pitched a story that way before. I have been pitched a story in the comments section of a personal website of mine, which is not the most effective way to do it. I would say that, my email address is available on that website and also on the LA Business Journal website, and I would much rather be contacted by email or by phone rather than sort of through social media, though. I suppose if you took a more traditional way of doing it on Twitter, a direct message or something, then that might be okay.
Is your personal... Oh, I'm sorry, Jonathan. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I don't really think it's the medium that's important. It's the message. And whether it comes from snail mail, email, Twitter, a phone call, as long as, particularly with phone calls, as long as you understand our schedules and aren't calling when reporters are on deadline, what we're interested in are stories and news. And so whether we find out about it from an email or another method, it's sort of secondary to the quality of the information that's contained in the message. So do whatever it takes to get it in front of us, but make sure it's good, I guess, is the message.
Can't argue with that. I'd like to ask you guys, it is almost 6 o'clock, but we had we had some audio problems at the beginning of this. We'd like to keep going for a few extra minutes. Are all of you okay with that?
Sure. Sure.
Hey, terrific. In that case, I have a quick question about, one thing that's very important for PR people is once we help place a story is being able to share it online and extend its reach beyond the publication that it appeared in. Now, the Business Journal is pretty much behind a paywall. Is there anything that we might not know as PR people in terms of being able to share stories that are on the Business Journal websites?
If you come into the office, you can buy a bunch of hard copies, and I'll give you. If you buy them from me personally, I'll give you a discount. Promise.
And if you subscribe online, you will get unlimited, unfettered access to everything that's on there,
including archives.
As a subscriber, though, if I have a link to a story, if I share that with a non-subscriber, will they be able to access that?
No. It's annoying.
Contrary to what trends are saying, this is still a business. However,
most technology stories are not behind the paywall.
Is that a fact?
That's true.
The technology stories in the Business Journal are accessible beyond the paywall?
The tech blog on our webpage is not behind a paywall. We do have stories that Omar writes for the paper that are behind the paywall. We do unlock a certain number of stories every week, and they are often the tech stories.
As a PR person, is there a way, if I have a client who is covered in a particular edition of the LA Business Journal, is there a way that I can possibly influence whether or not my client's story is unlocked?
It has no. It's an internal decision.
It's worth asking.
It's worth asking.
Yeah. Kim, I think you said you had 4 questions. Kim, do you have another one?
I do. I have a couple more ready if we can keep going just for another few minutes.
Go for it.
Okay, wonderful. Sheena from our Google Plus page again wanted to know about follow-up. So if someone has sent a pitch to you, how do you prefer for the follow-up to happen? Is it a phone call? Is it another email? So what do you prefer?
I personally prefer another email to a phone call, only because oftentimes I'd rather sort of consider a pitch having had an email than sort of have someone pitch it to me on the phone, mostly because a lot of times during the week I'm busy doing other stories, and so, I consider these stories during different times, and so it'd be nice to sort of do it on my own time, but I also am not always the best about responding to initial emails, so definitely don't feel bad following up. I often need those follow-up emails.
Yeah, another reporter here. We were just talking. Like the worst possible thing is to get someone's email and then like 15 minutes later get a call from them saying, "Hey, just wanted to make sure you got my email." Like that's a good way. That's a good way to not ingratiate yourself with us. Yeah, send another email.
I agree. I much prefer email, digital communication. Again, follow-up emails are welcome. There's times when I didn't see the initial one, just because we do get kind of a slew of emails every day. So feel free to follow up. But yeah, the phone call, a few hours after you got the email is not the best way to go about it.
Okay, terrific. Kim, what else do you have?
Okay, this one was submitted via Twitter from Humanitarian, and they would like to know, does the LA Business Journal like to meet with clients themselves, or do you meet with them? How does that work?
Well, I think, are you asking perhaps, and this comes up a lot with phone interviews, whether or not the PR person can lurk in the background of the phone interview, or do you guys have an issue with that? And what does it take to actually get you to come out and visit a company?
I think that phone interviews are the way that I prefer to do stuff, and I don't mind if there's a PR professional on the phone in the background as long as they tell me that they're there, and also as long as they don't interject too much, because I'm not going to be quoting the PR person. So if they say something that's really relevant or that they really want me to take a note of, if they're the one saying it, I'm not going to quote them saying it. I'm going to quote the executive that I'm talking to. So keep that in mind. It's fine to be on the call, but maybe don't interject too often. The other thing is that if you really want me to meet with somebody in person, I don't often prefer it, just because it means more work, quite frankly. You have to record the conversation and then transcribe it and bookmark it, and it just takes more time. So it's much easier a lot of times to do a phone interview so that I can be typing notes as I'm having a conversation. But that said, I just met with people today on site, and especially for real estate, if it's a big project, if it's something that you really just need to see in person and take a tour and that kind of thing, then it's certainly helpful to meet with the principals of a company. Another note real quick, not to be too long-winded, is that if you are scheduling a phone interview with someone, I think it's important to make sure there's only one person being interviewed on the phone at a time. At least that's the way I prefer it, especially if it's maybe two men. Because I need to be able to differentiate between who's speaking when, and oftentimes it's difficult to do that. And the other thing is that they fill each other's silences usually when there's two people on the phone, and so the time that I might normally take to finish typing out notes, someone's already kind of going on with the next topic, and so it makes it difficult. So I would say I prefer to speak with one person at a time on the phone, but in-person tours of sites and that kind of thing are not something I'm opposed to.
Well put.
I think having someone, meeting people in person is often nice. Sometimes, as Bethany said, it's not the best use of anyone's time sometimes. As for having someone on the phone during an interview, the best people who do it are the ones who sit there silently and afterward send me, a document or a report that someone mentioned on the call that I don't have access to, who sends follow-up information from the call. But there are also people who make the call feel like it's being handled, and that's absolutely the last thing you want to do, because I think to any of us, a source who feels handled kind of raises our antenna a little bit. So yeah, just sit quiet. It's fine.
I would totally agree with everything they just said. Calls just become easier because you can transcribe as you're going along, and going to interview somebody in person, while great and can often add some interesting details to the story, is just often not time efficient for us. That being said, there are certain occasions where if it's more of a profile, a day in the life type of thing, obviously that makes more sense. But yeah, the two people on the phone call is also a very good point. It's very hard to differentiate sometimes, and I've had a couple occasions where I've had to go through and and mention quotes to people and say, was this you, or the other guy, and that was just a whole other time-consuming thing. So one person on the phone is better.
Terrific. Kim, do you have? I believe you have one more question.
Yes, and this is from Sally Olmstead from our Google page. Sally wants to know, what is your interest in speaking with legal experts or attorneys for, on the record or some background perspective who are not party to a deal or dispute? Is that something that you do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and knowing those people, knowing who they are in advance, knowing people, or really those sources are great sources and ways for PR professionals to be really useful. There are a handful of folks that I'll call and say, hey, you represent a lot of lawyers or a lot of whomever. Do you know anyone who has this field of expertise who could talk to me like in the next 2 hours? That's really helpful. And we do rely on that kind of outside expertise pretty frequently.
I had a friend who covered the legal beat many years ago for a trade publication. He told me that it was very difficult when they would have a completely competent, quotomatic legal expert, but if he or she worked for a legal firm that had a very long name, they simply could not fit the name in the column width of their stories. Does that ever come into play?
Not that I can think of. Anyone else not had that problem? Yeah,
We
no,
just
I think
think
No, I don't think so.
End up referring to them by the first two names usually.
Okay.
If I could chime in, I've done a couple stories that have touched on copyright infringement, Digital Millennium Copyright Act, stuff like that. So I've sought out attorneys in that arena, IP law. So yeah, for me as well.
Same for me. I don't maybe talk to them super often, but land use attorneys and that kind of thing are certainly helpful for me.
And do you guys keep a file, some sort of record in your contacts database of who to turn to? And if I want to get my client on that database, what's the best way for me to do that? Just a simple email?
honestly, I think the best and most efficient way is for you to be on my Rolodex and for me to know who you represent. You know, I mean, if you looked at my Rolodex, you would see a lot of. There's a whole section. I'll admit it's called Flax. But I'm sorry. But it'll say, you know, this, you know, name, firm, phone number, and then it'll say, you know, there'll just be a note that said, you know, has lots of lawyers, comma, you know, bankers in San Fernando Valley or something like that. So sort of knowing who you work with, knowing it's easier for me to call 6 public relations folks than it is to call, you know, a dozen sources trying to find the right one. If I can call 2 or 3 people who know a lot of people, that's easier for me.
Well put. Kim, you have, I think that I just got a note that you may have another question.
We got a couple more. I know we're running a little over time here, but these are a couple good ones.
Yeah.
Sally Falco wants to know via Twitter. Oh, I'm sorry. Nope, that was the wrong one. I apologize. This is from our Google Plus page, and it was from Ron, sorry if I pronounced this wrong, Demeter. And he says, James and Bethany, he's worked with you before. Sometimes he decides not to send over information. When it comes to companies that you regularly cover, would you rather receive little things, or do you appreciate the selectivity? So that's from Ron.
I'm gonna shout out to Ron, and I believe it's pronounced Demeter. But when I said earlier that I've gotten one pitch that I could almost immediately send to my editors, that was from Ron. So well done, Ron. But yeah, I mean, I think I always, especially from a source that I know, I like to hear little things. But if you know that it's not going to be in our wheelhouse, then I appreciate that you can, you can sort of triage that for us. Yeah, I mean, if you think you have a good sense of what we do, then by all means, feel free not to send us little things that you know you're not going to get into the paper.
Yeah, I would say a similar thing. I think if you don't know that it's big enough to be of interest to us, and you don't know sort of the nuance of the smaller things that we cover, then yeah, feel free to send sort of the bigger thing.
Terrific. We're just about out of time. Any parting shots? We could do like a lightning round or something like that. If anybody has anything that they think that we haven't covered, or any specific advice that you'd like to give to PR people, let's start with Bethany. And if you have nothing, that's okay. But let's start with Bethany and then move down the line.
I would say call me on Mondays and Tuesdays and Fridays. Do not call me on Wednesday and Thursday unless I'm working with you specifically on a story. Those are the days that we're on deadline, so that's an important date to remember not to call us unless it's something huge and breaking and we need to know it right away. Mondays and Fridays are the best.
Terrific. And note that we are doing our hangout on Monday for that very reason. James.
Introduce me to interesting, important people, and we'll be off to a great start.
Terrific. Jonathan.
Well, I would just say, remember that we are in a selfish, competitive business, as are you, I suppose. And we want things first. We want them exclusively. We want them better with more access. So whatever you can do along those lines would be great.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'd actually like to correct you. The PR industry is a completely altruistic.
We're all doing God's work.
Money. It's our way of giving back.
Right.
Yeah, Jonathan beat me to it. Scoops are always welcome.
Scoops are always welcome.
Give your real estate stories to me, not Roger at the LA Times.
Yeah, take E. Scott record off your Rolodex.
This is getting really interesting right now. I almost hate to.
Well, I think it's important to note that the LA Times will cover things after we've covered it, but we won't cover it after the LA Times has covered it. So if you want your news to be shared in both publications, you should give it to us first.
All right. That's fantastic. Listen, I want to really heartfelt thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for your time and your effort, and for bearing with our audio problems at the start of the broadcast. You guys were terrific, and I learned a lot. I think anyone who tuned in will have learned a lot. This will be archived on our YouTube channel as well as on our website, on our landing page for Hangouts, which is PRSA-LA.org/happy hour. Thank you so much, and thank you all thank you to everyone who tuned in. We appreciate your time and your interest as well, and your questions. And hopefully we'll do another Hangout very, very soon. Stay tuned, and thank you.
Thank you.